Hello and welcome to Some of My Friends Read Comics. We've got Vince.
I'm an ape mother.
Great. I'm glad you are. We've got Chris.
Weeping Gorilla here.
Weeping Gorilla is the best. I'm Kia. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today we are talking about apes. Not really. The ape is only such a minor part of it, but maybe the part that we all remember the most. We are talking today about Promethea, a comic by Alan Moore from, when was this from? What, early 2000s, late 90s?
1999 to 05. 32 issue run.
So yeah, we're talking about Promethea, which is, I guess, kind of Alan Moore's take on, not really Wonder Woman, but maybe a Wonder Woman type character a little bit. Chris, you were talking a little bit about this last time, and I guess this ties in a little bit to Supreme, the last stuff we read with Alan Moore, where he kind of wanted to just write some Superman stories and used Rob Liefeld's character of Supreme to do that with. Right. And then he wanted to, you were saying, do the same thing with the Wonder Woman character, whatever her name was, Suprema, right?
Right. Glory was her name.
Oh, that's right, Glory. You're right.
She was in Supreme. She's kind of a minor character, but she also had a comic, put out by Rob Liefeld that was pretty much garbage. I guess the one memorable thing is that the guy that drew Wonder Woman in a thong in the 90s, Mike Deodato, he got his start drawing Glory in a thong in the 90s.
Oh, wow.
And then moved right up to the big leagues of drawing Wonder Woman herself.
Hey, those sins are past. He also made Sins Past with Gwen Stacy.
So
yeah.
What did you say, Vince? Sorry,
Mike Deodato made Sins Past with Gwen Stacy having Norman Osborn's kids. We're still kidding.
Oh, yeah,
that got me into modern comics, Kia. You were like, this book is great, and this artist, he's so different from Spider-Man. It was Mike Deodato's like, and I was like, it is kind of mind-blowing. And now I look back and I'm like, man, I was 19. But at the time, I liked it.
I was going to say, this was the 1990s Deodato before he discovered drawings of Tommy Lee Jones that he could just trace forever.
Hey, he also made really dark shadows on those pictures of Tommy Lee Jones.
We're spending a lot of time talking about poor Mike Deodato. He's got nothing to do with this.
Let's talk about a good artist.
Good art. Yeah, I enjoy his work. So Alan Moore, I guess, wanted to do some cool stuff with his Glory character as well, and turn him into something. And I guess what Rob Liefeld said, no, please don't turn my character into gold. Just go do it on your own shit. So,
actually, I think he was like, I don't have any money to pay you.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. So Alan Moore created his own Promethea thing, which is on that whole ABC America's Best Comics line that was like Top 10, which we've talked about, Tom Strong, which we've talked about, and this thing. I guess they're all in a bit of a shared universe, but they're fairly standalone on their own here. But
and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which can't possibly be shared universe. It wouldn't make any sense.
Exactly. And so this thing is, where to begin? I guess kind of talking about this idea of Promethea. I was looking at the trade version, which has a nice little introduction from Alan Moore talking about this Promethea character that has kind of existed in media little bits throughout. And he uses that in his storyline where it's like, okay, this character that's kind of randomly been written about from different writers throughout the years. What the hell's going on with this character? Who is she? Where did she come from? And he kind of turns it into this idea of the superheroine that exists only as a story, but can kind of come out as different writers create her. Like she's based on the power of imagination, which in and of itself is a really cool premise. And that first issue kind of. It is that very much like origin issue, kind of like, oh, I'm discovering this power, what's going on? But it kind of turns it on his head in the way that our main character, what's her name? Sophie something.
Sophie Bangs. She bangs.
Sophie Bangs, that's right. How can I forget that name? Sophie Bangs. Sophie Bangs has been researching this Promethea character for like a college paper of some sort. And in doing her research, kind of learns more about it and ends up becoming her because she's so, captivated by the stories. And it's kind of a crazy story. Very much as we go on through the series, it gets kind of trippier and weirder, but in a good way because it's Alan Moore, and Alan Moore is probably. I mean, he's definitely just the most solid writer in comics, maybe ever. Probably, right? Am I wrong?
Yes and no. I mean, I know a lot of people like Moore. This is probably the Moore that I've latched onto the best. And I probably say that every time we read an Alan Moore book. Between that and Swamp Thing and Supreme, and what else we cover? Top 10 and Tom Strong a little bit. And I've read like From Hell and Watchmen and V for Vendetta. This is the one that like I got the most into. This one also kind of felt the most like a comic book to me. And at least at the beginning, it felt like it had more characters and was less about like ideas. And the art is really, really great by J.H. Williams III.
Oh, yeah, we should definitely mention him. Yeah, he did a great job with it.
J.H. Williams III did like Batwoman with Greg Rucka a couple years ago, which is just like a tour de force of art. And Williams is really great at like deciding to just make like 3 different art styles per issue. He does all the covers, he does all the drawing, and he floats in between like complete art styles. He can make it look like Winsor McCay if he wants to. He's just a really amazing, great artist. He does the cool stuff with the panels where they're kind of like symmetrical, where things are the panel structure is the same on the left as on the right, and he does like stuff in between panel borders that I fucking love. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, and you say the different art styles. Like there was a few times I was reading through this and I was like, oh, do they do a different artist for these flashbacks or like for this issue? And I'm like, no, it's all just him. It's all J.H. Williams. And yeah, it's beautiful. And it fits really perfectly.
Yeah, and I know Moore is very much like a historian as far as comic goes. Like Supreme is very much like a history lesson in Superman, and being able to depend on one artist to just say like, well, I want it like this, and then I want a flashback like this, and Williams just to be able to do it, as opposed to hiring another dude, is really cool. Check out Batwoman. His Batwoman art is just fucking amazing. By the way,
right. Right. I feel like he does I think he does every single issue of Promethea, and I feel like that really evolved him as an artist. Like he'd done some like Batman comics and some other stuff, but like everything he does after Promethea, which ends in I think 2005, it's like a different J.H. Williams that comes out on the other side, and he basically does Batwoman in like 2007. So it's pretty quick that it's kind of becomes his style to have these crazy page layouts and to kind of experiment in cool ways. And it really, it starts here with this comic, which I guess we should talk a little bit about what actually happens.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I guess so. So Promethea, yeah. So as I said, this main character of Sophie Bangs, she's going through and trying to, kind of get to the bottom of this Promethea character. And the last person that you can find who was connected to it was a writer who is dead now, but his wife is still alive. So she's trying to go interview her about this character, and this widow is like, go away. You don't want no part of this.
Yeah, the classic trope though. You don't want no part of this. You stay away from this mystical thing. Don't even look into it. And meanwhile, like it's 1999, but there's flying cabs, and that's not really explained, but I like it.
Well, it's like alternate universe New York City, right? Which is just like super futuristic and crazy, but it's still 1999.
But they still have Ally McBeal.
They still have Ally McBeal, yeah.
Which is
I mean, it's like Astro City kind of looked into what the world would be like if superheroes existed. This is like Tom Strong existed in the 30s. And now, science has progressed, because there's been like super scientists for the past 50 or 70 years or whatever.
And as always, Alan Moore's world building is top notch. You've got your other superheroes floating around.
The five swell guys. The best name. It's such a fucking great name. The five swell guys.
Great name. Even if you're like not a comic book fan, you just see this and you just like instantly know, like, all right, these guys cool.
Yeah.
You've got Weeping Gorilla Comics, which is such a popular. You get like great Weeping Gorilla quotes. It's just like this sad emo gorilla. I think my favorite one that was on a billboard in the background somewhere was that Tamagotchi trusted me. I really like that.
I really like the Five Soul Guys. I think it's a really good commentary. I don't know. I always hesitate to call a male writer a feminist, especially when he's made porn comics with his wife. But
he made them with his wife.
Yeah, it was made with his wife, I guess. So that makes it okay, I guess. But it's a good kind of commentary on comic book feminism. That they're called the Five Swell Guys. One of them, Roger, is a woman, and everybody's
very
kind of
very
like,
Paul Poundstone.
yeah, everybody's kind of like, what's the deal there? Are you the new Roger? And basically, it is a guy, but it's a guy who she's a strong female character in that she is exactly like a man, and in fact, we find out later is a man who's been transformed into a woman.
Okay.
And so it's a good commentary on like this is what a strong female character is. She's just tough and acts exactly like a man all the time.
Yeah.
So she gets in with some like kind of like black demon monsters called Smees. And then Promethea shows up, and I really love how Promethea shows up to save Sophie. And you're like, this is not the Promethea I saw on the cover. This like pretty Wonder Woman looking lady, this sturdy gal who I'm like, yeah, that makes more sense. But I'm like, why is this Promethea? Like, why does this is not on my cover? I think that's a really cool like introduction to the concept. And then you realize it's that woman, the writer's widow, Barbara Shelley. Was that her name? I know it was Shelley.
I think so.
Shows up, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. How like that's the way it folded in and introduced Promethea. I was not expecting that, and that was a really nice surprise for me.
Yeah, and then you kind of learn that it's like this mantle that's been passed down, but not really passed down, but just kind of like gets picked up whenever somebody kind of comes around to picking it up.
It almost does what Supreme does, where it's like this character gets rebooted all the time, depending on who's writing it and what the era is. But it doesn't do the same as Supreme. I was kind of worried that it was going to turn out very much the same. Right. Whereas Supreme focused on the current Supreme's perception of these events, this at least issue 3 or 4 really focused on the past Promethea's perspective on the new Sophie.
Right.
Yeah, it's been a lot of time there. Let's go through issue 2 real quick, and we'll get to this sort of getting into the past. But they kind of do this thing where we have a brand new Promethea. All the bad guys are going to come out of the woodworks and try and take advantage of her at this sort of developmental stage. And
that's so cool.
See if they
I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like, hey, somebody different is in the suit, but we're still their mortal enemies, so let's go kill them.
And it definitely feels more like a Doctor Strange, like there's a new Sorcerer Supreme kind of trope, more than like a Wonder Woman trope, that it's like, there's like a new guy here. So now all the Dormammu can attack because this person doesn't know who Dormammu is.
Right.
And go ahead.
And I think like, this is only going to be a 32-issue run. It's not going to be that long of a run. Like, this gives, like, immediate impetus for all the villains to come out of the woodwork. Not really... I mean, she can develop a few on her own, but this is not going to be a slow burn. Like, everybody's going to be coming out. We can have one villain an issue because everybody's here and everybody's ready to go. And I like that there's, like, an in-narrative reason for her to be facing so many villains so quickly. That doesn't really come to pass, but it sets itself up so it could.
We also later see that like all the other past Prometheas are kind of watching her from this not really an afterlife. It's like the realm of the imagination, but they're watching her, and that it reminded me a lot of what was his name? I think the scientist from what was that Mark Millar comic? The Authority, that one. It reminded me of that character, in that it's kind of a trope that's used a little bit, but not quite used in this way exactly. But kind of that Buddhist idea that the character keeps getting reincarnated in different ways, but the old ones are still there watching it. It sits really nicely with me that the mentors are the past yous. It's kind of cool.
And again, I like it. Like I said, I hesitate to call something that I know is made by men feminist, but I think it's very positive in the way that Sophie's mentors are, Barbara and these other women that also, were Promethea and are Promethea. And it's not in a like, I'm jealous of you. It's like literally like, you're the new person. Like, this is up to you now.
Right. I love stories where characters are like facing their own mortality and like worrying about being replaced in their obsolescence. And they are to a degree, but they're also like more invested in like pushing the future forward and making sure that the new Promethea is ready for everything. And that's really cool. It feels a little like Dad Academy from Kroll Show, where where it's like a different character. Like I'm like, and that's the thing is this book sets itself up. I'm like, oh, so every issue is going to be like this, and it's not. But I'm like, oh, because the sword. The sword wielding Promethea is like, oh, so she's gonna learn like the power of the sword this issue from this one, and she's gonna be kind of hard on her, but the new Promethea is gonna learn a lesson at the end, and I'm like, that's a cool like concept, and I could see that spiraling forward for all the past Prometheas, and I think Chris, I totally agree. Like, I love the idea of them being very invested in the future, and like, it's yours now. You have to do this. Like, it's no longer us, and that's you don't get that much in superhero narratives. You get more like jealousy. I guess you get. I guess the Flash
or
and
the old heroes just still hanging out, and they're just like, all right, now I'm gonna go back to being Captain America again, but we're just gonna have two Captain Americas. That's okay.
I mean, I did like that about like the Wally West Flash, that he was very interested in like living up to Barry Allen's legacy. I really liked that. Like, it's a nice story beat, and it's something to like go towards. And I really like how Sophie. It was kind of weird because she becomes Promethea sometimes, but she's not always. And I think it's in issue 3 where her pronouns get really fucked up in the middle of the issue. And I think it's a really nice touch where sometimes she talks about her friend Stasia, but then sometimes she says Sophie's friend Stasia. And like her wording changes depending on like even in the same panel whether or not she's Promethea or Sophie. And I think that's a really cool touch.
Yeah, like at the beginning, in the second issue, she like goes to her friend Stasia, who's at this concert, and is like, "Hey, I'm Promethea now, and I don't know how to change back." And she's like, "Yeah, she is kind of trapped in that, and like struggling with this identity and separating herself from the mantle and all that." Which is, yeah, it was very cool in that she is this person, but is still herself, and they're still separate, which is like crazy and trippy. And then it just gets trippier because. At the end of issue 2, these 2 random dudes that have attacked her, that have been hired by one of the old bad guys, the Temple, I think. They've hired them, but they're like, oh shit, she's stronger than we thought. What is she? And they open a portal and escape, but her friend Stasia gets sucked in as well. And so she's got to go to Misty Magic Land in issue 3 to help rescue her friend. And this is just like the realm of imagination. And I mean, really, a lot of these last 4 issues is a lot more philosophy than direct plot, and just kind of talking about this world building and exactly what is going on with this character and how it works and how it can be anything you want it to be just based on your imagination. Like, she first turns into Promethea because, as the old Promethea says, hey, you've got this, just write a poem about Promethea and how you are her, and that's what turns her into Promethea. And that connection of like the imagination connected to this character of stories with Promethea is really cool to me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a very like, it's an idea of, it's, Alan Moore is a magician or whatever. It's very much like summoning something from the other side, but it's not in a negative way. It's literally like, this Promethea is this girl in the 5th century whose dad gets murdered by Christians, and she goes into like the imagination world, and she can kind of cross back over in a new form, and it's it's in a positive way of thinking this thing makes it happen, and now I am this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's so cool. Like, I mean, I love the transition into Misty Magic Land where she's like, you need to imagine this world, and then you'll be there, and then you won't be here in the hospital. And it's the same, like, panel structure 6 times, just slowly more elements of the Misty Magic Land world are being added to the panel, and the real world is, subtly fading away, so, like, columns show up, and then people disappear.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, there's these old like hags with bird bodies that remind me of the Beatles from the Jungle Book that are like, look at this outrageous person. She's acting like she just imagined herself here while she's really in a hospital. Whereas we all know that she's just imagined she was in a hospital, and now she's back here.
I like this. My problem a little with it is, and I think Moore does it better, and I've just read a few similar books to this. This book gets a little focused into the idea of ideas and the idea of storytelling, and the way that Fables kind of does, and a recently completed Vertigo book, The Unwritten, by Mike Carey and Peter Gross, really gets into. But Unwritten was really good, and then it got really far up its own butt. about the nature of storytelling, and I really started to hate it, and I just quit like before the last 2 volumes completed. And this touches, and it's getting into a similar vein. I think Moore does it better in terms of giving like a history lesson and like a writer's idea of like, if you imagine this idea, then it's real, and that's what you're putting into the world, and the philosophy of creativity, and that's who the people are touching into the immateria, and it's cool. He touches up to the line where I'm like, you're gonna fucking lose me, and you're gonna make me like not like this book anymore. But I think Moore does it better than Carrie and Gross did it in Unwritten. So I'm okay with it.
There's a good balance. Like, I don't know if y'all are gonna read on, but Promethea goes to the immaterial worlds. She goes, beyond the dream world and up into all the other different levels. And it can be up its own butt a little bit. It's very cool in the art style and everything. But there's also, Alan Moore does a good job of Grace, who is, she's the former Promethea. She's based on a Weird Tales artist. Actually, I shouldn't say who they're all based on. I should quiz you on who these people are. But Grace, she finds a way to come back to the mortal world and basically be the new Promethea, except she's kind of, runs around with a sword and stabs people a lot.
Oh.
So it kind of creates a problem where it's like she is basically like a Punisher type vigilante. And so while Promethea is like, but what's this level of knowledge? She's, stabbing people with her crazy sword.
I'm definitely interested in reading on, mostly because, like I said, these last few issues are more based in philosophy, but they do a nice job of setting up more of the world and more of kind of what we're going to see. We just kind of learn more about some of these other villains, like this guy Jack Faust, who's kind of a magician who is like trying to trick her a little bit into thinking that Promethea is going to be the end of the world. And that where more of the philosophy comes in, where, this other Promethea is like, well, is that such a bad thing if we end the world as we know it, which is filled with war and terrible things?
And I think that's where the later volumes and issues start going in terms of calling it, like, I think it's the end of the world as we know it or something is one of the last few issues titles, and Jack Faust kind of turns into like a Shade from Starman type character, is from what I understand. Yeah. So you'll see more of him. I read a really great Salon article that talked a lot about, from like 2005 when Promethea just concluded, about like the philosophy and how Moore starts giving a lot of lectures. I think there's a great quote from Moore about the book, and he was like, "There's 1,000 books about like superheroes and stuff, then there's one book about like philosophy. So why don't you just let me have this book?" Which I like. It starts talking about like the Kabbalah and like the 10 different tenets of the Kabbalah and 22 different tenets of something else, which is why the book only has 32 issues. And there's 32 pages in the final issue. There's like the number 32 is important. It's also only 32 issues. So, supposedly it gets a little rough near the end in terms of like, you got to stick with it. It pays off. Williams's art is great throughout. But that's my understanding of where the book goes.
You don't have to tell me this.
Am I pretty accurate on my interpretation of it then? I just read about it and I was like, this sounds interesting. And it's only 32 issues. Like, I'm definitely, I can read a short book.
I'm kind of curious to know how the 5 swell guys are going to kind of fit into the big picture, because we kind of get these hints that there's something going on with the psychic member of the team. He keeps like having these weird interactions with Promethea where he thinks something's going on, and the other members of the team think he's screwing up because he's not seeing stuff, but he's just kind of not sure what it is. I'm really curious to see where that thread goes. I don't necessarily want you to tell me if you know, Chris. I mean, I'm sure you do know, but it was very intriguing where I'm like, oh, the 5 swell guys are going to keep showing up. The weeping gorilla is in every little issue of this thing, and I just wanted to read more weeping gorilla quotes because those are very funny. Somebody at one point has a weeping gorilla watch, which has I think the quote, "This was supposed to be my time." It's a good one.
Oh, they're so good. All right, so pop quiz, hotshots. Can you name what these Prometheas are based on? So the first Promethea is Anna. She's the I guess servant of a writer in the 17th century. Any idea what work of fiction this is stealing from?
Are they accurate to the time period? So it would be a 17th century writer?
Yes.
So 1600s?
Oh, goodness.
I don't know. I'm really
I don't know.
my writers. Chris, you're much...
We're 0 for 1 so far. It's The Fairy Queen by Spencer.
None of those words.
All right, great.
All
I
right.
think they even specifically mentioned her, or maybe Alan Moore mentions it in his little letter at the beginning. I probably read all these. All right, I'm gonna fail. Keep going.
All right, it's gonna get easier. So okay. Margaret, she shows up in Misty Magic Land. She is basically naked except for like convenient strands of clothing that always covers her boobs. Mm-hmm. And so what is she based on? She's kind of a combination of things.
Margaret.
And also she's got a little assistant friend, little Margie.
Oh, that little girl that kind of talks in a different font? Is that her? Okay, yes. Okay.
That's kind of the giveaway to what she's based on.
Who do I know who talks in a different font? Deadpool. It's based on Deadpool.
Vince, any guesses?
I'm terrible with my my literature history. I know my comic book history from about like if you ask me about Golden Age of animation, I'll be like, this is clearly based on Felix the Cat, but it's not. So,
well, we were getting close. This is a newspaper strip animation.
Oh, is it what's her name? That
Hi and Lois
girl's name.
Yeah, she eats that big sandwich.
Kathy.
It's I'm just gonna spoil it because y'all aren't getting it. It's Little Nemo in Slumberland.
I even said Winsor McKay earlier today. Damn it.
And then she becomes when World War I starts, she becomes the Angel of Mons, which Wonder Woman did that. So whatever. All right, and then the next one is Grace. She's the one with the sword. She stabs people. She is an artist. She's also a woman. Let's see. Can you figure out who she is, or at least get close to who she is?
She's based on Wonder Woman's creator's Paramore, mistress. No.
All right, I'm thinking of feminist writers. What was this era?
1920s and 30s.
I mean, I gotta guess Edna St. Vincent Millay. She's my favorite female writer from that era. Probably not. No.
What? Well, you're off because she's actually based on Margaret Brundage, who was the Weird Tales regular artist. You look her up. She did a lot of what would be considered softcore porn that was sold on to teenage boys in magazines.
Oh, that's cool.
So and they actually, I think, reference her specifically. They're like, you're a lot like Margaret Brundage. It's like,
I feel so bad that we're failing because we've literally read like all these names in this comic and I just don't remember any of them. Alan Moore, you were supposed to teach me history. No.
All right, only 2 more Prometheas left. All right, there's okay. So Bill is a man who becomes Promethea. We find out later what happens to her. It's not great. Any guesses on who this would be?
Nope.
The Wachowski sisters.
Percy Shelley.
That's a good guess. I think this is a hard one. I think this is either Marston or the writers immediately after Marston writing Wonder Woman.
Oh, okay. So some comic book writers. All right, we're close.
Marston is the one who created Wonder Woman. I think I was 1 era off. Because I know there was definitely one that like reminded me of him. So that would probably be it. Yeah.
And the last one is Barbara, who we saw. I don't even really know if she's based on anyone, but to the extent she is, she's based on her husband, who was an artist, who was, I guess, Hispanic and created a new version of Promethea. Any guesses on who that could be?
So I thought because
George Perez.
I think that's right.
Oh really?
Oh my God! I got one.
Good job.
Vince, I think I cut you off. What were you?
No, I was getting thrown because Barbara Shelley. I was getting confused by Mary Shelley, very early feminist writer. Obviously made Frankenstein.
Yeah, I think they actually wrote Mary Shelley somewhere in the comic. I remember reading that and getting confused by it as well. I don't know if it was a typo or if I was supposed to like pick up on something else. And I was like, I don't remember anyone's name being Mary Shelley because I was already thinking of Mary Shelley because of the last name. I don't know.
Right.
It's not important.
I mean, I'm sure
they probably had a joke referencing it. There's a lot of really funny jokes that I think first-time readers don't really get.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Like, did y'all get the joke when the singer at the rock concert sees the owl monster fighting Promethea, and he's like, "What do you call a cow with wings?" And his like backup, whatever, is like, "That joke is in really bad taste." Did y'all get that?
No,
I don't get that.
I am not very well read, as we have observed.
A cow with
yes, a cow with wings. What do you call a cow with wings? It's an old joke, so I don't blame you for not getting it. Your dad.
All right, hold on. What do you call a cow with wings?
Yeah.
Uh.
This is a good dad joke for you to incorporate later,
Yep.
Vince,
Yep.
into.
I just got a good dad joke yesterday. I posted on Facebook.
So what do you call a cow with wings? Linda McCartney.
Oh
Ouch.
my goodness, that's all right.
Ouch! Oh, I get it. My dad would have told that joke. He loves telling wings jokes.
It's a bad.
That's a rough joke. Oh my god! Wow.
Dang, that's some shade.
And they, I mean, this is an old joke, so they're referencing it and saying, this is in bad taste. You shouldn't make this joke.
Did she just died around 99?
I think so. She'd either died or she had been, been diagnosed with what killed her.
Yeah, I think she might have died right around that time.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's why it's in bad taste, And plus, he didn't say the joke, right? He didn't give the punchline, so I guess it's okay.
She did write the worst part of "Live and Let Die," though. The little reggae part at the middle. What does it matter to you? You're like, what is this doing in this song with McCartney? Not to speak ill of the dead, but I just did.
Yeah.
What do you call a cow with wings?
I'm gonna move past this joke because I feel like I'm offending somebody. So the last thing that I want to mention that I also liked is this villain that the Five Swell guys keep fighting, the painted doll, and his dollograms. I just liked that wordplay, the dollograms. There's lots of the Manigators as well. There's so much fun names for like the bad guys throughout this whole thing. It's just a world that I want to keep living in. It's why Top 10 is fun. Tom Strong is fun. It's just like if you love superheroes and just kind of want these like quick little glimpses into these fun worlds with them. Like I think Alan Moore's ABC line is just like the best for that. I had a great time reading this.
Yeah, I'm sad that Jim Lee joining DC Comics kind of killed America's Best Comics. I feel like that era from like 1999 to like 2003 or 4, he was putting out like 3 awesome comics a month, and it was pretty cool. And then he just like harumph and quit whenever Jim Lee sold Wildstorm and DC bought it, and Jim Lee is now one of the managing editors of DC Comics, and Alan Moore hates them because they'll never stop publishing Watchmen.
Yeah. What's the last thing that Alan Moore has written? Because I'd be curious to kind of see what he's up to these days.
The non-porn division. Because he wrote Lost Girls, and there was like a follow-up to that, wasn't it?
Lost Girls is like a decade old now.
Yeah. But there's another one.
I never read Lost Girls. I'd be curious to see what it's all about at some point. But I never actually read it.
And then he did League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, like New Century or whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's like coming out. It just came out, or it's coming out soon. It's like a new story, right?
And I think he has a co-writer with that because I don't like that at all.
He's writing something for Avatar Press called Providence, is what he's...
Providence, yeah. Providence just finished up a 12-issue kind of Lovecraftian horror story. Yeah, I'm going to have to read that. I love me some Lovecraft. And Alan Moore taking that on. I'd be down to check that out. Maybe one day we'll do that on the show here.
And he wrote a prose novel. That's right, Jerusalem.
Oh, all right.
Which I assume is also about magical, whatnot.
According to Wikipedia, at the time of publication, it was one of the 10 longest novels written in the English language.
Jesus.
It is 1,266 pages. Go big or go home, right?
Well, good for you, I guess.
Also, it's just another thing that doesn't really matter. But he names those demons that Promethea fights after real in quotes, I guess, demons from the Book of Solomon. And I was looking at just the list of them, and as I was looking at them, I was like, "Hey, I know a lot of these. I know Bahamut and Valifor and Ifrit."
Those are from Final Fantasy.
Yeah, clearly some Final Fantasy localizer was like, "Oh, we can just take these demons, and now they're summons for my Final Fantasy game."
I don't even play Final Fantasy.
Hey, you animate some cool animations around that, and you've got yourself a superpower. Boy, I think we're pretty much coming to the end of what we've got to say about Promethea. I'm definitely going to keep on reading. Only 32 issues. Why not? I'm curious to see where this thing goes. Vince, sounds like you're into it as well.
Yeah, I am. Chris, I think, told me like a decade ago to buy this book, and I did, and it's been sitting on my shelf for a decade. So I'm very happy to report that I liked it a lot. I'd read more of this. I think of the more books, I know you guys like Top 10 a lot more than I did. I liked it, but I didn't like it as much as you did. This is probably the more that's jazzed me the most, and I like it a lot. Maybe it's the art, maybe it's the unwritten but better conceit, and it's got characters I can latch onto a little more that aren't like sad sacks like Watchmen. And I know Moore has changed like his perspective on writing stuff like Watchmen, but I like it, and I like the art a lot. I really like the art.
Vince, I did have a feeling that you were gonna like this more than Top 10, just because you tend to prefer solo books more than team books. And this, it kind of has this feeling of where it is a solo book, but there's so many characters that still are the same person that it doesn't feel like you're learning about so many different characters that all sort of keep pointing back to the same person. So, I totally see where you're coming from.
It's a main character with a supporting cast. I love Daredevil, I love Foggy, and we're talking about Starman earlier. I like the Shade, and I like all the other characters in the Blue Starman, and I like all those characters. But you're right. I think I like the reflection. They all still come back down to the main character. That's a good point. I should look at that. More stuff like that. That's a good point.
And Chris, you recommended this, so of course you love it. Are you going to go read it again?
I might, because it's really good. I said, I think it's so interesting. And he talked about it being a little bit up its own butt about philosophy, but I think it is, and it's not just kind of regular feminist, but it's showing a different method of kind of problem solving, because it's not a comic where Promethea punches out her villains and then they go to jail. It literally is a comic about solving problems in a
Yeah, I didn't mention my favorite little bit in the whole thing. There was one point where they're in the realm of the imagination, and they're going up against this idea of this writer who was just a pseudonym. I forget what the name was, but it's a pseudonym that a bunch of different people used to write Promethea comics or Promethea stories. And so this pseudonym has this power. It's this big person until Sophie realizes she can just no, wait a minute, no. These weren't all written by one person. This person was kind of known for writing stories like this. This person was known for writing stories like this. And even though they all use this name, they're all different people. And so she takes that big problem and chops it down into little pieces. And it's oh, okay, this is a very clever way of using the power of imagination to defeat your villains in a way that just kind of makes sense and doesn't feel hokey and doesn't feel oh, womp womp, we learned a lesson here. It just really does feel it's okay, wow, that was very clever and real in a neat little way. I loved it. I'm also looking at a picture of Alan Moore on Wikipedia right now, and thinking of him as the most feminist comic book writer is very funny to me. So I'm just
I
gonna
didn't
keep
say
thinking
the
about that.
most feminist.
I know. I'm putting that in your mouth, but yeah, I think I'm gonna say that Alan Moore, the most feminist comic book author of all time. No, you know what? The most feminist person ever. Period. That's what I'm gonna say.
I mean, the sad thing is for comic book writers, he's in like the 98th percentile, and he still has problems.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Oof. Yeah.
Not in this book, but y'all have read Watchmen, you know.
Yeah. Killing Joke. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he didn't write the movie, but yeah.
Did you see the Batman and Harley movie where Harley Quinn has two butts?
What?
They drew like her having like a sexy butt crack, and then somebody accidentally drew a sexy butt crack above that sexy butt crack.
Well, she's like arching her back or something, so that
it's weird. It's weird anatomy.
I don't know about all this.
That's also she has Dick Grayson handcuffed to her bed in that scene, so I'm not watching that.
Nope.
Oh boy, Harley Quinn is. I mean, DC's turning into a completely different beast based on what seems to be popular in their movies and stuff. But that's maybe a conversation for another time. So I think we should pretty much wrap up the book on Promethea for now. I'm gonna finish reading it and yeah, enjoy it. But for next time, we are going to be doing some Marvel Knights stuff from the early 2000s. Marvel Knights was this little imprint that Marvel created for their, kind of slightly more mature, kind of teen stuff. And they had a series called Marvel Knights, which was sort of like all their street-level heroes coming together to solve a problem, which sounds a lot... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
It was kind of the Netflix of its day, Marvel Knights.
Yeah, sounds a little bit like a certain Netflix show I know, The Defenders, which... we're going to read some old Defenders comics to kind of tie in with the new show, but then realize, no, the Defenders comics have nothing to do with the show. So, why don't we do something that is a little bit closer? So, yeah, Marvel Knights 1 through 6. We'll have Daredevil and a bunch of other folks like Black Widow, Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu. Oh, my God, the most popular character in all of Marvel Comics. They will be teaming up to beat somebody, I'm sure. And we will read about it and see how it goes. So we're doing Marvel Knights 1 through 6 from the 2000s. Yeah, I'm excited for that. Never read these. Should be interesting at the very least.
After seeing no one get karateed into unconsciousness, we better see it in these Marvel Knights issues.
Oh, exactly. That's all I want. Karateed into unconsciousness. Ugh. I also want to make sure. I hope. I don't even know if Iron Fist is going to be in these, but I want Iron Fist to walk into a boardroom and explain his plan to the villains while he has absolutely no way of getting out of there. That is all I hope for.
And Sigourney Weaver's just like, oh yeah, tell me about that. Okay.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to explain. Yeah. Okay, cool. That was a really good scene.
We're going to talk about how Iron Fist is the worst next time, but I just have to say it right now. Iron Fist is the fucking worst. God damn it.
Yeah, but he's such a good heel. He set you up to love Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah. He does.
And everybody else.
TV show Iron Fist.
Yeah.
Not comic book
TV show Iron Fist. Yeah. Although, the more I see TV show Iron Fist, the harder it is for me to enjoy comic bock Iron Fist. Because comic book Iron Fist is kind of jokey and stupid and weird and God. All right, we got to stop this now.
We're catching up on Game of Thrones right now because we had the rain in Texas, so we just got an HBO free trial. We watched all of season 4 of Game of Thrones. I don't think Sir Loras says a single word, and I'm like, that's right, Iron Fist. You just be quiet. Shh. You just stand there and brood. Let everybody else talk around you.
This guy. This guy.
All right.
All right. Let's get out of here. Thank you so much for listening. For Vince and Chris and myself, Kia, we love you. We hope you will join us next time. Have a good night. Stay safe. Good night. Good luck.
I forgot to tell you, Ape Mother is an anagram of Promethea.
Oh, shit. That's okay. We can put that in at the very end.
I think also it's revealed like in like one of the last issues. Also, I'm atop her or something like that is also is in the sex issue. Is another Promethea anagram that definitely has atop her in it.
Yes. Spoiler. Yeah, there's a lot of anagrams, and there is a sex issue.
All right, I like anagrams. I'm okay with that.
And sex issues.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that too.
It's kind of gross, frankly.
What about palindromes? Any good palindromes? I used to see a lot of palindromes when I was a kid. I don't know if they were just popular back then, or if we've already written all the good palindromes that were ever going to be written.
Weird Al has a palindrome song on his album Running with Scissors. Go hang a salami, I'm a lasagna hog is a palindrome.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That's a good one.
Wow.